Good morning, ladies. Thank you for joining us on the video group. I know we don't have a huge big group this month. Most of the ladies have come back to the physical club days, which I'm very happy about. The club day video recording is quite tricky. It's a little bit daunting, but we get through it. So this month we're going to be making something really awesome. I've decided to clean out, and we have done some drawer dividers. You can either use it as a drawer divider or a fancy box to divide things into. So this is a 9 square divider, and then my one sample I made much bigger. So the bigger sample was it's just for me, just to show you. I worked with the industrial felt. As you can see, it is fantastic stuff. This is my new obsession. I absolutely adore this stuff. So we're going to be working with the industrial felts a little bit more regularly now. The project that we're going to be making today is going to be this size. It's a 9 block square. So we've got space 8 by 8 centimeter size blocks. So you could put 2 pairs of socks in there. You could put, I don't know, whatever you're going to be putting in these dividers. I'm making them for our drawers. If you are going to be making them for the drawers, then perhaps we're going to go for slightly less detailed finishes on the outside. But even so, I think just go ahead and play. Just have lots of fun with your machine. All right, so for today's project, I'm going to just quickly work through the kit with you. So our kit will consist of everything that you see there will be in the kit. So you will have a piece of felt. The felt that I've supplied is 42 centimeters wide. Oops, let's drop that down. 42 centimeters wide by the width of the fabric across the roll was 150 wide. So you get a huge piece of felt. From this piece of felt that I've cut, you can make 2 of this size quite comfortably. It gives you enough height to make the box without any joins in it for a 9 square box and the height of 8 centimeters. If you do want to make a bigger one or a slightly smaller one, you can do that. You might just have to join for a bigger box. For a smaller box, you can make it. So I have put in the notes, I have in the cutting list, have put the cutting list for cutting 2 blocks or two completed kits. The reason is otherwise you're left over with a huge big piece of waste like this that you really couldn't do anything structurally with. So in the notes I've put it that you can make 2 of those out of that. If you just want to make 1 or you want to make something completely different, you can go ahead and do what you're going to do. Then you get a piece of faux leather. So it is a really lovely feel leather. It is black. I've gone with a black contrast color. If you're not into the black and you would prefer perhaps a tan or a red or something else, you can go ahead and match it up with whatever you're going to be using. So I've given you enough of the faux leather to make your little corners with. So the little corners, just finish it off. I think it just needs that little something on the end there. You can put your own hardware on. I tried to get the hardware ordered in on time, but I was just a little bit late, so I didn't get my hardware in on time. I want to put little feet underneath and maybe some silverware somewhere else. Okay, so that's for the little feet. Then for the ties around the box, because we assembled it and we joined it together with a bit of leather cord. So it's like leather rimpy that we use just to decorate things with. So if you have a look at my finish, this is used to join my squares. So if I hold this one up, you might see it. I'll show you a nice close-up version of what I did just now. So we've got the little crisscross on the outside and it's laced together on the inside, and we used our screw punch. So it was lots of fun. It was very crafty. It wasn't a very ultra structured or strict project. It was lots of fun, and we just, I think, making something different this month. It's not the usual quilted or embroidered thing. I made a really crafty thing to this month. Okay, so it's those 3 elements in your kit. Your kit will cost 150 Rand if you choose to order the kit. So please let me know if you want the kit, and I will put the kit aside for you. Kits are limited. I only make enough kits for the amount of RSVPs that I have, as you know from the past. Alright, so I am going to get started with the actual cutting out and making of the box. Let's get started. Okay, so the placement for 2 squares, I'm going to start with my base piece. So on the notes, it'll show you quite clearly where to start. So I'm going to just show you how I managed to pull off 2 out of this. I'm going to use my Stitch Witch guideline ruler, and I'm going to trace off or mark off a 42 centimeter square. All right, so by cutting your square out first, you end up with a little piece at the end that you can cut all your strips out of. So I would suggest cutting out the 42 centimeter square before you cut out any of the little strips. So if you are going to make 2, I'm just going to demonstrate here how I did 2 out in one go. All right, so I'm just measuring off 42 centimeters by 42 centimeters, because the piece of felt that you did get, or that you will get, is exactly 42 centimeters wide. So you just need to cut off 42 centimeters of that. So you will have one block, move that down, you will have a second block. Okay, now on the bottom section, sorry, I've got a problem there with the cable. All right, on the bottom section, this is all the leftover here. You will have about 80, 60, 70, let's just see here, 60, about 70 centimeters left over, and by the width. So I'm going to now trace off on this section. Well, let's go from here. I don't know if you can see all of this. So we're going to trace off 8 centimeter long wide strips. I'm just going to go all the way down to the bottom. Right, and I'm going to do another one at exactly 8 centimeters. I'm using my friction pen to mark with. It works the best on the felt. I found the blue tip markers are just not very visible, and they dry up so quickly because I think the felt just absorbs all that little felt tip has to offer. So use your friction pen or maybe a ballpoint pen. The only thing with a ballpoint pen is you can't remove the marks if you have made a mistake. All right, so on this bottom, or this next strip, the strip that I'm busy measuring off now, I am going to mark off my sizes. 32 centimeters, and from this end 32 centimeters. I know that in my project, in the 9 square box, let me grab it, in the 9 square box, you need 2 strips of the inner strip of 32 centimeters, and you need 2 pieces at 16 centimeters long. So from this section, I can cut off 32 centimeters twice. Let's do that. And from the next section as well, I'm going to just cheat. I'm going to go this way. 32 centimeters and 32 centimeters. Use a good accurate ruler because this has got to fit flush. Let's extend this line. Okay, in the next little section, I am able to get 4 16 centimeter long pieces. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so there's 16. And 16. 16, and the last one, let's get it there. So this is going to give you all your pieces for 2 boxes. So you will have 1 square base. Oops. You'll have a second square base, and then from the little bits at the bottom, you are going to have a 32 centimeter long piece. just draw this line all the way through, because I'm going to cut that. So you will have 132, 132, a 32, a 32, 16, 16, 16, and 16. So that's going to allow you to make 2 complete boxes. And whatever's left over of the felt, you can create other divisions. If you wanted to make another little box with divisions, maybe perhaps without the base underneath, you could do that. So I think these are a little bit flashy for inside a drawer that you're never going to see. So perhaps on a table somewhere as a little organizer, we're going to put this on our TV cabinet with all our remotes in. We've got a remote for every single device. So you can use it for pretty much everything. My husband's got it, he's got his socks in his one already. Okay, when I come back, I am going to have all my pieces cut out and I'm going to start assembling one of my boxes. Right, we've cut our pieces out. I've put the second box aside because we are only going to be making one in the video. So for one box, you will need the 42 by 42 centimeter base, if you want the base, and then you will have 2 32 by 8 centimeter strips, and you will have 2 16 by 8 centimeter strips. This will give us enough fabric cut out and ready to go to make a 9 square box like this. So this is what we're going to be making up now. I think let's start with our outer, the base, and then we'll come to the strips. So for the base, you need to mark off now around all the little edges. I'm going to mark off 8.5 centimeters with my guideline ruler. That 0.5 centimeter is pretty important because that's going to be enough for a stitching line all the way around. So please just be careful that you follow those instructions. Otherwise you're going to have a little step over here where it joins up. It's not going to join up evenly. That's going to be either too high or too low on either one of them. Alright, so I'm marking off 8.5 centimeter lines all the way around my box, or around the 42 centimeter square. Eight and a half centimeter. Let's do this one. I hope this is all visible on the video. I'm not sure what the quality is like. I hope the sound is better this month. We've put a little bit of investment into buying good sound for the video. Alright, so there we go. We've got 8.5 centimeter marks marked all the way around our block. Okay, so these are going to be our folding lines later on, and those lines that intercept in the corners there are our placement lines for when we create the corner a little bit later. So we've created that. Before I cut the corners out, I never ever cut my corners out until I'm ready and know full well that I'm happy with it. So I'm going to quickly do all the markings that I need to have marked out on the edges to make some decorative work, or to do some decorative work. So what we did was we worked with some of our dimensional stitches in the machine. This you can leave out. It's not a have to do or have to have. I just did a little bit of dimensional stitching so that we could bring some of our machine functions and features into this project, and I thought this was just the best way to do it. It was a lot of fun. We did some of the little applique stitches. Alright, so right now, before I carry on, I'm going to quickly mark off my punch marks and my center marks for the decorative work. So I have marked off all my sides. I have my increments for the placement of my strips later on, and I have a placement line for the design that I've decided to put around the outside edge of my work. Alright, let's carry on with our strips. So on the strips we have 4 pieces. This is very easy. I've kept the numbers as simple as I could. So I have gone with an 8 centimeter square. I thought an 8 centimeter square was a nice round number. It's easy to multiply 8 and it's easy to mark it off. Alright, so I'm just going to put these side by side and mark once. So what I'm doing is I'm marking from one raw edge up 8 centimeters. And from that line again, 8 centimeters. So in essence, on this piece, I will have 4 segments, 4 divisions, because this is the 32 centimeter long strip. Alright, and if you've marked it off accurately enough, this top section should measure 8 centimeters as well. Perfect. Alright, so I'm happy with that. So you're going to go ahead and mark off your 8 centimeter markings on the strips like that. And then on the shorter strips, you will do exactly the same. And because these are only 16 centimeters long, you only have to mark off 1 line. Alright, and if you measure that top section, it should measure 8 centimeters as well. So we've got our markings marked off. When I come back, I am going to have the machine set up and ready to go. So for my machine, I'm going to be working in a similar color to this. If you like a contrasty look, you can go for a contrast color with this. I did that with one of the reds earlier on, and the red on the gray looked very nice. I'm going to do the gray on gray for this one. I just want it to look as neat as possible. So we're going to start with our stitching. The stitching is going to be in the same color gray as I've got. You can do it in whatever color you want, like I said before. We've marked off all our strips with our 8 centimeter divisions. And what we're doing now is we are creating our little individual pockets. So we're going to be stitching these bits together. I thought it was quite a clever way to put my pieces together. So in the notes, I've color coded them to make them as simple as possible. So you're going to be stitching that piece to this piece. So I think I called it purple, green, pink, and orange. And it'll show you step by step where to stitch. So in order for us to get this exact shape, I'm going to be starting with this first little piece. So you can see the shape of it there. So this piece has to be stitched to this piece. So it's going to come down, or we're going to come down 1, 2 increments, and I'm going to put it smack bang in the center of that. You can't use pins with this fabric, it's just a little bit too uncomfortable, it's a bit thick. So I used my quilter's clips. I've got a nice box of quilter's clips, a lovely gift from somebody for my birthday. I feel very blessed. Okay, so I'm using my quilter's clips to join up or to match up my markings. Alright, I've set my machine for woven heavy, and I have put a gold 90 needle in my machine. I'm going to go with straight stitch, just an ordinary straight stitch, and I'm going to start at the beginning of my row. I think the most important tool for this entire project, for the sewing side of things, is your little button reed in your sewing machine box. So I'm going to be using the fatter side, so the thicker side of the tool, to help me get past the beginning of the felt. If you don't do this, what happens is, I'll take a quick close-up just now of the beginning of the work. The minute you put your foot down at the beginning, your foot sits at a strange angle, and that's where you can start breaking needles. So I'm going to work with my button reed. I place that behind the foot, out of the way of the needle. We don't want to stitch through this at all. And because that's there, it keeps my foot straight and level. I'm going to reinforce the beginning because we don't want this to come undone. Reverse, and then go forward for a few stitches. Alright, you're going to do the same at the end. You're going to reinforce the beginning and reinforce the end. And because we've selected woven heavy, your machine has set your tension to exactly the right setting. Alright, so I have now joined those two pieces together. So I've got this funny looking finish. So in order for me to have split open divisions like the box has got, I took my work, so I've stitched it flat. I'm going to lift it up and I'm going to open up the work, and I'm actually going to stitch this down. So I used a bridging stitch in my machine. I'll come back with the camera angle just now to show you the bridging stitch. So the bridging stitch is a little zigzaggy type stitch, and it'll stitch in the middle, to the left, to the middle, to the right, to the middle. It's a really clever stitch, and it worked perfectly for what I needed it to do here. Okay, so when we come to the end, I'm just going to use my fix function and tie that off as neatly as possible. I've left the width as it is, a standard width in the machine. I've left it, the bridging stitch is number 19 on my machine, and I've left the width at 6 and the length at 6. So what happens now, your little box stands at the right angle. He's not going to be flat like he was when we first stitched it. Alright, so that section is ready to go. Then we're going to pick up our next piece, and we are going to stitch the next piece onto this. So I have got to take my next color, and I'm going to match up the next two divisions. So I'm just going to put these together as neatly as I can. I'm going to go back to straight stitch and stitch this closed or together. You don't even really need the clips all that much once you get started, because the fabric grips to itself so nicely and it doesn't shift around. Okay, so I have done the straight stitch on this. Before I move on to the next piece, I select the bridging stitch and I split my work where I've just stitched the straight stitch, and I'm going to work the bridging stitch in its place now. So for this, I have my machine set up for fix automatically in the beginning, and I fix it at the end so that I don't have an unraveling of my stitches when I'm finished with my project. Alright, so you can see how it starts to take shape nicely now. Right, then I'm going to join my little short piece to its counterpart. I just want to make sure that I've got the right one. Okay, this one's going to go here. In the notes, it's beautifully put out. You can't really make a mistake. It's color coded. I think the color coding helped me when I was writing the notes, because I did a very big box initially, and then I realized that too many divisions can be a little bit of a maths minefield for me. I'm not really a maths person. Okay, and before I move on, I open that up and I'm going to stitch the bridging stitch down the center of that. Okay, it's not too much stitching. It's actually a very simple project this. There was very little stitching, and what's nice about the felt is you don't have raw ends and you don't need to overlock or over edge anything. Everything is so neatly finished off with the felt. Alright, then we have our last little block to complete. So we're going to put our lines on top of one another so that they match up perfectly. I think I'm going to use clips for this last section just to help me out a little bit, just to keep me straight. Alright, go back to straight stitch. Please just be careful when you're using your button reed. It's a really awesome tool, but at the same time it can be quite damaging if you hit that accidentally with your needle. So just be very mindful of where your button reed is when you're working with it. Okay, so now we've got to stitch this little one open. This one is a little bit more tricky because we have a complete closed in ring that you can't get to. So what I did was I placed it under the foot. I started at one end, flattened my work as best I could, just to get that out the way. And I'm only going to go as far down as my sewing machine will allow me to, without breaking anything. Tie off, lift up, trim and trim. Then I turned it around and I did it from the other side as well. That doesn't meet in the middle, but as long as your outer edges are done, that's good enough. That's it. Okay, so our little strips are assembled. We can put this aside and wait for our next step. So you should have this finish. You should have your 9 squares. It looks like a little bit of a noughts and crosses board. Okay, so if you've got that and that's your finish, then you know you've done the right thing. So just to give you a quick close-up of the stitches that I used for this, I have gone for woven heavy. Okay, for joining my strips, I used a straight stitch. The straight stitch gives you a slightly longer stitch length. So grab 2 pieces of this. Alright, and then later on for the bridging stitch, I used stitch number 19 on my machine. So if you have a look, I'll zoom in a little bit so that you can see it quite nicely. Okay, so the bridging stitch is that little stitch that's going to run down the center, slightly to the left, down the center, to the right, down the center, to the left. And that's what held my stitching open. All right, so I'm going to quickly go back to a straight stitch. Okay, so for a quick close-up view, I've got 2 pieces of felt that I would like to quickly stitch together. I've selected my machine a straight stitch. I've placed my fabric where I want the needle to start stitching. When I drop the foot, you can see quite nicely how dangerous the angle of the foot can be for the beginning of your stitching here. So lift your foot up, place the button reed behind the foot, and line it up nicely. Drop the foot down. You're going to start stitching, so you're going to come forward a few stitches, and I'm going to go backwards a few stitches. And you can see how slowly I'm working. I'm not rushing this process at all. I really don't want to hit anything unnecessarily, break a needle. Gold needles are expensive. Okay, when I get to the end, I'm just going to reinforce that and stop stitching. So your fix function, I don't know if that's strong enough or a good enough finish for this, but as you can see how flat everything lies, so we want it to stand at an opening like this. So I take my 2 pieces and I open them up, I split them away from one another, and this is where I selected my bridging stitch. So stitch number 19, I placed that at the beginning, reinforced the beginning with a fix function, and the width of the stitch is just perfect. It worked so well. So what happens now, it doesn't lie flat anymore. It lies at a perfect little crisscross. So it looks like you've sort of glued them together perfectly like that. So that's the finish that we want on our strips. All right, so I am going to quickly embellish the outside of my box before I carry on. I have got to stitch some of the little decorative stitches on. I am going to use the dimensional stitches. So like I explained before, I'm going to use the dimensional applique stitches. So let's get started. I need to mark off though on my little center line, I know that my completed design is 4 centimeters long, and so from there to there I know that it's 4 centimeters, so the center of that is 2. So I am going to mark off the center or the beginning of my stitch. So I know that my little block over here is 4 centimeters, so I want my center to be there and the beginning to be around about there. So I am going to mark off the start point for all my little designs. So 8, so half of 8 is 4, so there we've got the beginning, the center-ish. As long as you've got a beginning line to start with, you should be good to go. Let's just make sure that you can see it. Okay, and 2, that's my middle. You'll figure this out, it doesn't have to be on. I've just added this on as a little bit of an extra. Alright, let's get started. Alright, the nice or the most important thing when you're doing these types of stitches is to have a pattern restart on your machine and a pattern beginning and end. So I'm going to use my stop function. I have pressed the stop function, so that's going to give me one single stitch. It's going to do only one repeat of this stitch. So let's match it up the beginning nicely. Alright, I have a little piece of leather that I'm going to use as my finish. I have black thread at the top, ordinary all-purpose. I'm going to stop with my needle down so that my machine will stop. I need a bit of an extra high lift for this fabric. Press the stop function, my machine stopped at exactly the right place and it didn't make any more stitches than it needed to have. Alright, I'm going to bring this a little bit closer so that you can have a look. Right, so for those of you that want to do the dimensional stitches, I'm going to quickly show you on the screen how to find them. So if you go to Woven Heavy, because that's where we'll be working, I'm just going to start new. To find the menu, I just scrolled through to the L menu. Oops-a-daisy. The L menu, and the L menu give me my dimensional stitches. So that'll be your applique stitches, your applique and pop-up stitches, and then some of the sequin stitches. They're in the L menu on this machine. All right, so I selected stitch number 12. Stitch number 12 is a very wide stitch, so the machine asks you to please select or to attach the S foot. So you can see there's the S foot, and I have the design that I want. So very important, I will always just do a pattern restart just in case I had done a couple of extra stitches, and then on the actual buttons on the machine you are going to press the stop function. The stop function's light must be lit. And when you come over to the screen, you'll see that it'll just give you one complete design. It won't keep running just running off. It's going to do one sequence and then stop. So once you've stitched it out, you will press the stop function again and it'll just give you one stitch. All right, so I hope you enjoy the dimensional stitches. That's what we've done, and we had lots of fun doing that. So if you have a look here, I did it with a little bit of a turquoise fabric, and on this side with the black. Right, so we're done with our strips, we're done embellishing our outer bit. Now we're going to put the box together. So we have marked everything off. We have the lines visible on the outside. It just makes it so much easier to stitch out. So what I did was I used my friction pen, as I said before, and the friction pen irons away beautifully. So I used my little craft iron, and at the end of the project I'll show you, the lines just disappear so beautifully. So I am going to now match up my corner lines. So these are what are going to create our box. It's what's going to create the box for us. So if you've marked off that 8.5 centimeter markings all the way around, the little crossover bits are what create our corners. So let's quickly put that together. So I've gone back to my gold needle and my bee foot and a grey thread again. All right, I'm going to go for a straight stitch. I was busy with the dimensional stitches just now, so let's go back to straight stitch, heavy woven, and I'm using my button reed, slightly off, and adjust myself. Reinforce your little corners nice and strong. Right, and the quilter's clips work a charm. So let's do the next corner at the same time. I'm just going to continue stitching until I've done this. Let's just go as quickly as we can. Oops. And if you've got your right angles folded perfectly, you'll see that your stitching should come out at exactly the same place on both sides of your fabric. If you've marked them off accurately, and if you've folded that accurately. I'm going to go all the way around. When I come back, we're going to do our side seams as well. Okay, so we've created the box shape that we need. Now we've got to give it structure. So only once I'm 100% sure that I'm happy with the shape of the box, only then do I go ahead and trim my corners away. Some people don't mind cutting their corners away first time. I just trim this away, leaving about 1/4 inch seam allowance next to my stitch. Okay, so I'm going to trim nice and close to the edge, but not too close. We don't want to cut into our stitching. We want to leave a bit of a finish. It looks like a feature on the actual fabric. It doesn't look wrong being left like this. Okay, and the last little corner as well. Okay, so you end up with 4 little blocks like this. I've got tons of these now. I'm going to collect these and make something patchworky with it. Okay, so now we've got to create the actual strength and structure of our box. Otherwise, it's going to just be rounded and stand like this. This could be a nice feature all on its own as well. But for this project, we want it nice and sharp. So the line that we drew earlier is our fold line. So we're going to fold on that 8.5 centimeter marking that we made earlier. I'm going to fold all the way around and put my clips, and I'm going to select a straight stitch, and then once I have clipped and pinned everything down, I'm going to change over to my edge stitching foot. So the edge stitching foot is one of our favorite feet to work with. It allows you to get close up to the edge with movement. So you've got the ability to move everything around. So I have got this little edge stitching foot. It's the foot with a little guide on the edge of the foot. All right, so I'm going to attach that foot. I've still got straight stitch set on my machine, and I'm going to move my needle to the extreme right hand side. Alright, I'm placing the foot as close to that edge or the fold of my corner as I can. It might not get all the way into the corner because of the thickness of the fabric. So you're going to start stitching, reinforce it with a reverse function, and keeping the edge of the fold up against the little edge of the foot is what gives you a nice straight stitch all the way around your box. You can lengthen the stitch if you like. I think I'm going to go for about a 3.5 stitch length with straight stitch. And when you get to this end, it's a little bit easier to get closer to the corner than on the previous section. Okay, so now what you have is you have a little bit of structure to your box. Alright, so this is what's going to happen. And when we're done, I give it a little bit of a press and it just folds out perfectly where you want it to be. Okay, so let's do the next little section. Okay, so now we have to mark off our punch marks or our punch placements on both the strip piece as well as on our little box. So we're going to start with the strip, and to make it easy we've done 6 holes, so we need to mark off at 2 centimeter increments. So I'm going to just mark off 2, 2 and 2. I'm going to go all the way around and make sure that every single one of these little strips is marked off at 2 centimeter increments. Okay, I'm going to put this piece aside and show you how I mark the box. I'm going to put this aside, so you will have all your punch markings or placement for the punch markings put there. On the little box, we're going to do the same thing. We've already got our placement line to match them up. So now what we need to do is we need to measure 2 centimeters from the top of our box and go in 2 centimeter increments. So I'm just going to lay it flat and work with it this way. Alright, so if I place my ruler at the top 8 centimeter over here, because remember it's a little bit longer because we've got 8.5 centimeters. So I'm measuring from the top down. Right, and the same on that line. And you are going to go all the way around the box on the lines that we marked off right in the beginning. Okay, let's do another one line. If you mark and measure from the bottom of the box, from the closed end, your holes are not going to match up. You're going to end up with holes that are a little bit off spaced from one another. Alright, so I'm going to go around my box and I'm going to mark off my punch hole markings all the way around the box and all the way around the strip piece. Right, so we are going to punch holes into our felt. The felt is wonderful, it doesn't fray, it doesn't fall apart. So I'm going to use my screw punch for this, and I have put on one of the sizes. I've gone for a not so big size and a not so small size, a nice middle size. So if you do have a screw punch, you'll have multiple size tips for this. I'm going to use my awl later on just to clean the punch out. Alright, so I have marked off where I want them. I'm going to just gauge about 1/4 inch away from the raw edge. And you're going to give it quite a firm press to cut out the felt. Alright, so that's the kind of hole that you're going to be left over with. You're going to have 3 holes on each strip end, and you will have 6 holes on each line on the box. Oops, that one's a bit close. Right. I'm only going to go through one layer at a time. I don't want to take a risk of it not cutting right through. Alright, when it starts to get a little bit full, I just take the awl and I push out the excess cutaway bits. Oops. what's nice about the screw punch is if you do have a punch set and you don't mind punching 1 or 2 holes with a manual punch set, it works perfectly, it does the job. But if you've got to do 3 times however many strips you've got to do here, it can get a little bit much. So having this little screw punch is just so awesome. So all I do is push out those little bits and pieces.
Make. Quick. Cake. Leg. Big.
Right, and cut that out. Alright, so I have done all the holes on my little strip pieces. I can put that aside and move on to the little box. So we've already assembled the box, so I'm going to pull my box to the corner of the table. And now over here, I have to put 2 holes on either side of the line. The wider apart you go, the more prominent the little stitch with the rimpy is going to be. If you don't want it as prominent, you can go a little bit closer with your holes. I quite like the look of it being quite prominently a little crisscross of leather cord on there.
No, I'm going to say the word, you're going to look for the sentence because you're going to touch that.
Alright, I'm going to go all the way around the box and I will be left with holes like this. So I don't know if you can see it, but there we go. We've got 6 neat little holes on either side of that line. And those little holes are going to correspond with the strips that we've got on the inside. Alright, so you will get a strip of this faux leather and the pattern to print out for our little corner pieces. So the pattern is, it's just, you can put it on, you can leave it off. It's a little cap for the corner. I'll just show you what it looks like. I think it just finishes off the little ends nicely. So we're going to quickly do the pattern for that and cut out our pieces. So this is the pattern piece. There's a little notch marked off over here, and that just means that that matches up to that point to give you the perfect close on the corner. Alright, so on the wrong side of the leather, I'm going to just mark off with my chalk pen where I need to cut. Okay, so you need 4 of these. Once you've marked off all 4, you're going to cut them out. So let's cut one out.
What am I thinking about?
So I have to cut out sort of on the inside of that white line.
I
hope you're thinking about your work.
So what letter am I thinking about? No.
Right. And once these are cut out, we will come back and we're going to continue with the embellishment stitching.
The very first one on the alphabet.
Alright, so you're going to be left with 4 of these. 4 exactly that size, and you can mark off
Let me read it.
the little placement line. That is how far over your little overlap should be.
Eyes are closed.
Okay, so that should make sense. We're going to stitch that closed and that becomes our little corner later on. Alright, I'll come back and all my little corners will be cut out. So we've got our leather caps cut out, traced off and cut out. So I have 4 of these, and on the one side I have just marked off the crossing line. So this is just my placement line for where the leather is going to cross over. Alright, so if you line that up nicely, it's going to work nicely. So let's start with our top stitching. I've threaded my machine with a heavy duty or a top stitch. You can use a top stitch thread. I've just used a Gutermann heavy duty grey color thread. I have set my machine for leather stitching because this faux leather that I've used is very realistic and it reacts like leather. It's not quite a vinyl, so I've gone for leather and I've said start new. and I'm going to go for a straightforward straight stitch. No funny business, and I'm going to start my top stitching in this corner over here. So let's just mark it off. I'm going to start my top stitching here. So at the V, we're going to start there. We're going to go all the way around the outside round edge and finish off at the beginning of the V again. Alright, so let's get that started. I've got my H foot on. Without the H foot, your machine is not going to feed comfortably. Alright, and I'm just using the inner step of the foot as a guideline as to how far my stitching is from the edge. It's about 1/4 of an inch away from the raw edge of the leather. And all I'm doing is, this is not functional, it's just nice to look at. Okay, cut that away and that. So let's quickly stitch all 4 of these, and when I come back we will complete our project. Right, so we are going to close our little feet in, the little caps, and I'm just going to match up that little white line that I drew with the raw edge of the one side. Match that up nicely. I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to select the belt loop stitch. That's the little stitch that goes from the left to the right, to the left to the right, and then it ties off. So it's one of my most favorite stitches. It just does all the difficult holding down for you. Alright, so we're going to do belt loop stitch. I still have a leather needle in my machine, and I have changed over to a black thread now so that you can't see any untidy stitching in the wrong color. Alright, so I have neatened off or closed off my little cap with the belt loop stitch. I'm going to put 2 so that I definitely catch all the little lifting edges. Okay, next one. So we're going to match up that little chalked line with our raw edge, and I'm going to close that with a little belt loop stitch. Lift and move along. Alright, so same story with the next one. Right, so now I'm going to put this together, and I'm going to put a quilter's clip just there just to hold it in place, and with my Teflon foot on still and the same little stitch that we used to close the feet with, the belt loop stitch, we are going to stitch this little end on just like that. So on the very end, that's all we want. Okay, so that's attached on the corner. Now we can secure just the little bottom edges if you like. I'm going to carry on all the way around. Okay, let's put that under the machine. It starts to get a bit bulky, so I do it at this point now before I attach the insides, because it can get a little bit uncomfortable to work with, having the insides in there and then putting this leather bit on. So that little belt loop stitch just does the trick. It catches it just in the right place and it secures it well enough that it will never come undone. It'll hold it there just forever. Alright, next corner. Same story here. Pinch it, slide it under. So we have completed our box. Our box is completed. We've punched our holes. We've put our little leather caps on and we have completed the strips and punched the holes. Right, so our next step is to assemble the box, but before we do that, I am going to remove the purple pen marks because I don't want them to be there forever. So just to show you how quickly they remove, you know that a friction pen is removable with an iron. So all I did was I just touched the iron over the blue pen or the purple pen just like that, and it just takes the marks away like magic. And with this little small iron like this, it was just so much easier than with a big iron. So you just have to make sure that you've marked off all your markings and punched all your holes before you remove your guide. It's a little bit more difficult to remove the guide once you have stitched this all together. So this is the point that I do it at, and then
So you just go over the lines to make them disappear like magic.
And we've removed all our pen markings. You can see there are no purple pen markings left behind. I think I've removed them all quite nicely. And now we are going to place our inner piece inside the box piece. All right. So that's going to go in there. And you will have a piece of Rempy cord in your set that will be big enough to make one box up. Alright, so I've cut my little cords into 30 centimeter long pieces, and I'm going to start my threading at the very bottom. On the inside, I'm going to thread through the center. Alright, I'm going to go back into the box, and I'm going to come out over there, and this one is going to come out in the next jut hole. Right, we want to make this quite tight so that it doesn't slide away or pull away while we're working. And then I'm going to cross over and I'm going to go into the center holes. What I used to help me was a little loop turner, especially when I went through a hole a second time or a third time with the cord. So on the inside bit, I'm going through the middle hole, and I've got to go through this middle hole twice. So I'm going to take my loop turner and I'm going to place the loop turner through the hole, catch the end of my cord with the little hook and pull it through the hole. Alright, so that really did help. It's like a little crochet hook almost. Okay, and then we're going to come out that same hole. If you pop in a little bit later on, I don't know how else to demonstrate this because I don't have a cameraman and I don't have an editing process, so we just hope for the best here. Hope that you can understand and see it, or otherwise you're going to just come up with your own threading system. This way I went through systematically and I caught each hole once. Right, I'm back at the top now. I've just got to thread one last piece through the top hole. Alright, so if I come closer, you can see I have my little crisscrosses going on nicely, and on the inside I've attached it to this fin over here, and I've got these little tails left over. So what I'm going to do with the tails, I'm going to thread the tails back through and down into the little fin, not through the outer piece. Alright, and let's do this one. This loop turner just does the trick because you can't thread through the same hole multiple times without it being difficult. So this loop turner just did the trick for us. We figured that out when we were threading our box. If you don't have a loop turner, you could possibly use maybe a flexible bodkin or something along those lines. Alright, and the little leftover tails that I've got on the inside, I'm just going to leave them there. I don't need to tie them off. The length is just right. Okay, so I have got my little tails and I've pulled them through. I just want to show you, I don't know if it's visible on the camera, I'm working alone. Alright, so I've just got the little tails left over. I'm going to go ahead and thread all of these up and show you the finished result when I come back. Right, so we are done with our threading. So we've got all the little leather rimpies on, as you can see over here. We've got the little crisscrosses, and on the inside they're all neatly finished off. So I've taken the little tail and I've woven it all the way back down to the bottom, and it's just long enough that it's just got a little, like a little leftover piece sticking out. So our box is complete. We've got all the little ties on, all the little embellishments, our corners are on, and you can add some little metal feet to the bottom if you like. I didn't get the hardware in on time. I am going to still try and get some. And that is your box. I hope you enjoyed that. So that's the end of our club day. Thank you so much for joining us on the video link. If you have any questions or any problems with your project, just give me a call or send me a WhatsApp and I'll try and sort it out as soon as I can. Just so that you all know, videos are quite time consuming to make. I don't think I'm going to be making a heck of a lot of videos in the near future. I will, however, keep the videos perhaps just for one or two of the important club days that we do. So I hope you enjoyed today's or this month's project. I think I really enjoyed playing with the felt and doing a little bit of hand stitching. It was very different. It was something fun to do, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know, just give me some feedback on the video. It's just nice to know where we can improve things, how we can change things, but please be kind. It's tricky to do videos. Anyway, enjoy, and I hope to see you all soon. Hope to see you physically in the club days. It'll be really lovely to have you all here again. Thank you for attending our video link.